Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's so great to have you here with us tonight for this challenging topic of problem sexualized behaviours. Just going to say right up front, I am a little bit nervous, but that doesn't stop me from doing things. I am quite happy to run into things that are difficult. And as I've been doing research, I've realised just how little information there is available for families who are struggling with problem sexualised behaviours. So we are going to get into it. So if you're a professional learner here this evening, we can provide you with a professional development certificate. The professional governing bodies now require that there's an assessment as part of your professional learning criteria. So we've got 3 questions that we'd like you to answer and then send the answers through and we'll send you a certificate. These will be available on the website tomorrow. So don't worry if you don't get hold of them tonight. I will show the slide again at the end of the night. So what are we going to cover? What I want to make really clear right from the start is I am not an expert in this area. I'm not specifically trained. I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just sharing my current knowledge and experience as a therapist. There will be people who are way more expert than me, who can probably have a much more informed opinion. But what I'm going to bring you is what I've learnt along the way. So I just want to read this to you before we start, because these are the current sexualized behaviours that we are dealing with in the clinic at the moment. So I'm not going to apologise for any of the language that I'm going to use because it's just all about what we're talking about. If you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A. Karen will be moderating this and she'll go like this at me if there's a question that I need to answer straight away. Feel free to chat with each other in chat, put scenarios up, offer suggestions or resources. What we learn from everybody together is much more than what we learn just from one person talking. So here we go. Wanking in the bedroom with the bedroom door open, flirting with boys, taking girls saying hello and just being friendly as if they're in love with you and then getting upset and mad at them when they don't want to talk to you or be your girlfriend anymore. A crush that you've had since prep and you've considered that as a girlfriend in a failed relationship. A misunderstanding of the sex ed class and then freaking out because your balls have dropped and your penis is really small, and then becoming so overwhelmed with that, you chew your lip raw and melt down for a few months before everybody works out what's going on. Groping your mother's breasts every morning and your father becoming overwhelmed, anxious and protective, seeing his wife sexually assaulted on a daily basis. Kids being put into respite and not being supervised correctly and engaging in sexual exploration. And girls getting pregnant in day programs and in respite. So these are the current ones we're dealing with right now. So a couple of weeks ago, there was an incident in a respite centre, and they're the actual real things that we are dealing with now as a practice. And we talk about these things every day. So it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be fun because it's not pretty and it's not fun. Sex is designed to be something that brings us great joy and amazing intimacy and pleasure in our relationships. However, often when our young people have autism in particular, or intellectual disabilities, or sensory processing disorders, or they're suffering with impulsivity, and impulse control issues, it becomes very, very difficult. Let's go on to the next slide. So what is sexualized behavior? Any behavior that is of a sexual or intimate or personal space nature and often involves touch. Unfortunately, often young people with developmental delays don't understand that some of the touch that they think is okay is actually interpreted as sexual. I had one young lad that was touching people's hair all the time and stroking their hair, and people were experiencing it as an assault. And we had to do a lot of work around that, because when this person was young, patting their mum's hair was okay, but he didn't actually understand the social nuances that it's okay to pat mum's hair, but it's not okay to pat the lady that you walk past in the shopping centre, or teachers or kids at school, and it was becoming a real issue. So there's consensual behaviour in the context of a relationship of equal power and is age appropriate. So that's fine. Developmentally appropriate curiosity. I still remember now when I was, I must have been 5 or 6, we played nurses and doctors with the little boys down at the back fence. It was just curiosity. They had these little things that hung off them, and we hadn't really seen them before because we were just all little girls. So there was nothing wrong with that. And we know there's nothing wrong with it, because when adults come along and they go, oh, actually, they're your private bits. You keep your body to yourself and let's not do that again. That it's resolved very quickly and moved on from. That's absolutely appropriate and nothing to freak out about. Masturbation and self-exploration in an appropriate time and context is absolutely okay. Masturbating on the bus in front of people or at the kitchen table is not so appropriate. Consensual touch and appropriate personal and intimate space incursions are fine. Okay, what is problem sexualized behavior? So it's any behavior of a sexual or personal space nature that is not consensual or age and developmentally appropriate. One of the great issues that we have is that regardless of intellectual development and capacity, bodies develop. They just do their age appropriate and physiologically appropriate development. And it doesn't matter what we do, that's what happens, and it's perfectly normal. The challenge comes where the body is 14, 15, 25, 35, and the developmental capacity is 4, 5, 10, even 15 can cause all sorts of problems. Okay. Factors to consider when we're assessing sexualized behaviours. How can we find the antecedent and the solution? We can't do it on our own. And often when there are problem sexualized behaviours, we see a sexualized behaviour, but it's actually a sensory issue, or it's a medical issue, or it's just a developmental issue. So we're going to unpack that a little bit later. I've just been reading about how some anal sexual stimulation and masturbation can often start as a result of encopresis and actually tapeworms. And so they become itchy or uncomfortable, and they start scratching and itching, and they discover that scratching, rubbing and itching is actually pleasurable and relieves their discomfort. So it's not, whilst they become sexually stimulated, it's actually not the antecedent. The antecedent is something else altogether. So often we can miscue sexualized behaviors. Often communication is a real issue, and it may be that they have a tight foreskin, or they've got a problem with their urethra, something's just not quite right, and they try and sort that out by fiddling with it, and then they become aroused by that, both girls and boys, and that can become a real issue. We often think about sexualized behaviors as being a boy issue, but in one of the schools I work in at the moment, we've got an 8-year-old girl who sits and rocks and stimulates herself to an orgasm in class. It's a big deal and it's uncomfortable for everyone, but she's autistic. She finds it soothing. It takes her out of the space that she's in where she's not coping socially, and it's a coping mechanism that we're not dealing with as a sexual issue, but as a lack of capacity to tolerate the environment. And if she's not sitting on the floor for long periods of time and the work is actually differentiated for her appropriately, we don't see any of that behavior. So it's just a coping mechanism that is using the sexual parts of her body, but is actually not intentionally sexual. And that can often be the same thing with masturbation. Okay. Any questions or anything yet, Kez? No. All right. Some scenarios. So I went through some scenarios before. The 2 children in the respite setting. And that was absolutely a supervision issue. These 2 young people are of similar age and similar intellectual capacity developmentally, and they had been hanging around each other all day and getting into each other's space, and then in the evening they were actually left unsupervised, and they did begin to do some sexual exploration, and that has caused a huge amount of stress and distress for both families, as well as crazy investigations all in the background. I was working with the police around this incident again today, and this has been ongoing for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So it doesn't, both of the children are okay, both of the children are safe, but the family's trauma around this and their ability to trust people to care for their children is really, really heightened and very real. The reality is that, I don't like to say it, but most children with a disability will be sexually assaulted at some stage. And it doesn't matter what we do or how hard we try, it's quite likely that it will happen. If we think about one of the children, well, both of the children who were in the setting just recently, the mum had made an agreement that her daughter would never be in the setting when there was a male child there. And for whatever reason, there was a male child in the same setting at the same time. This young lad that was involved as well, he had been sexually assaulted 2 years previously by a peer there, and the agreement had been that it would be one-on-one care at all times. Unfortunately, due to staff ringing in sick and lack of availability of staff, there was only 1 staff member on. These things happened. There was no malicious intent, but it was absolutely a systemic fail. These children were opportunistic and impulsive. There was no intent. It was just that they weren't adequately supervised, they were bored, and they didn't know what else to do. Had they been adequately supervised and they had something to do, that would never have happened. So it's often when they're just left to their own devices and aren't appropriately supervised. Touching a parent or other person inappropriately is a really, really big issue, especially with boys towards mums. Because what happens is, generally speaking, as women, we're smaller than our male children. So once they hit 14, even younger sometimes, they're physically bigger and stronger than we are. And they can be very intimidating, and it can be really, really scary and confronting. And unfortunately, because when they are sexually aroused, they feel love, and they actually love us as their mothers, they try to express that love in the way that our body shows us to express love. It's just not safe, okay, or appropriate. And it's absolutely appropriate that fathers lose it when they see their partners or their wives being sexually intimidated every day. I've got one mum that dreads getting up every morning. We're working on having him have a shower as soon as he gets up in the morning, and having a masturbation schedule so that he has to go and have private time in his room with the door closed, with explicit support and instructions that that's his special private time, so that that desire and urge is reduced. There's a fascination with sensory sensations and responses. Lots of our young people are still at the cause and effect stage. If I touch my penis, it goes hard. It's just a basic cause and effect thing. Yes, Karen?
Steve's just asked, are there stats on how prevalent that is?
No, I didn't see any stats, Steve. I think one stat I saw was 85% of autistic children or children with autism engage in some kind of sexual stimulation that's not appropriate in time or place. But that's the only stat I can remember seeing today. So that was in the DHHS handbook for respite and care facilities around responding to problem sexualized behaviour. So that's available online. So that's no worries. How's everybody tracking? I know it's a bit full on.
It's a tough subject.
It is, yeah. And I'm talking about real situations and the stories of the people who are on this webinar tonight. And I'm going to talk about my own story in a minute. Okay. I just want to see where I've got my story, because I'm going to go here and then I'm going to go back to strategies. One of the big questions is, will my child end up in jail? And I would like to say, no, they won't, but I need to tell you that they might. If it's not managed and dealt with well, and my son at 13 did end up in jail for sexually assaulting my best friend's little boy in the room next to us. We would have thought that we were supervising really, really well, but it happened. And he did end up in jail at 13 because of the age, the chronological age differentiation. So he was 13 and the little boy was 4. So the actual developmental age wasn't taken into consideration, because his developmental age was probably 4 or 5. And so there was a size and power differential. So I am pretty passionate about this topic, although pretty wounded by the system not supporting me as they should have as well. And I guess that underlines the why of what I do. If we had have had somebody who would talk to us about developmental stuff, help us get the correct diagnosis, and given us the support that we needed, my son wouldn't have been in jail at 13. So you need to know the reality of it and how to get appropriate support and where to go to get that support. Yes, Kez?
Cindy's just made the comment the age of criminal responsibility in Victoria is 10 years old.
Yeah. So this happened 20 years ago. So my son's 33, 34 now. And look, it was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever been through. It really was horrific. And there's no other way to say it. There's just nothing else to say about it. It was just horrific. And there was nothing good that came out of it. And so that's why we're so passionate about talking about the hard stuff. And what does the future look like? Well, for him, it hasn't been fantastic. Just that's the reality of it. My fear of what other people will think was overwhelming. And even in disclosing to you tonight, I feel anxious about what you're going to think. But I feel more anxious about what it would be like if I knew that you needed this information and I didn't share it with you. And I want to let you know there is a way through this. Yes, Kez?
Yeah, Isabella just asked, is it common for a 4-year-old to be sexually active? As I know this little boy at preschool who tries to be sexually active with a little girl.
Yes, it is really, really common, and there's lots and lots of different reasons for that. So they may be mimicking something that they've seen on telly, on the internet, that they've stood at the doorway and watched their parents engaged in a perfectly beautiful, intimate relationship, that they've been sexually assaulted, that it's normal exploration, that it's cause and effect, that it's trying to communicate a feeling of affection and kindness. It can be all of the above in little bits all mixed together. But it's really, really common. It's not a problem if it can be redirected easily. If it can't be redirected easily and the child keeps going back and back and back to that behaviour, you urgently need to get an occupational therapist in to provide a sensory diet of activities to distract the child from that behaviour. And an OT is the person who can help with that when they're little. Any questions yet, Kez?
No, there isn't yet, Bobbi.
Cool. All right, now let me go back because I skipped. All right, let's go. Let's talk about some strategies on what to do rather than talking about what it is. We could spend all night talking about what it is, but we all know exactly what it is. So let's talk about a range of different strategies. Communication is a real issue, and getting a speech pathologist on board early to get communication sorted out is really, really important. Because if they don't have words to communicate how they feel, then they actually look for physical ways to express. They use their behaviours to communicate. One of the circles that I don't have on here, which I can't believe I didn't put on there, was interoceptive awareness. So, I know, Karen, can you believe that? One of the things that is a real issue with kids with autism and developmental delays and intellectual disabilities is underdeveloped interoceptive awareness. Now, some of you will have heard me speak about this ad nauseum, but I know we've got some new people on the webinar tonight. Interoception is our 8th sense. So we've got our 5 senses that bring information from the outside in. Then we have 3 senses that give us information from the inside out. So we have our vestibular sense, which is our balance. We have our proprioceptive sense. So if I say to you, put your hand in the air, you can just do that, and your proprioceptive sense tells you where your body is. And if I say, put your hand out in front of you, you can do that because your proprioceptive sense helps you to understand that. Then you have your interoceptive sense, your interoceptive awareness. And that's the connection between what's happening in your body and what it means, and how you respond to that, and how you change your state of being. So for example, you have a sensation in your stomach. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? Are you about to throw up? Do you need to do a wee? Do you need to do a poo? Are you anxious? Are you angry? Unless you actually understand what the sensations in your stomach mean, you can't actually make a choice to change your state of being. We often see it in children when they're writing. They hold their pencil really tight and they press really, really hard, and they become reluctant writers. Now, we know that they're reluctant writers because their hand is sore, their arm is sore, their shoulder aches, and it's very uncomfortable, unpleasant to actually write. So they actually become task and demand avoidant around writing. That's because they don't have interoceptive awareness enough to understand that they're in pain. So interoceptive awareness is connected to their sexuality and their development as well. So understanding what those sensations are. Yes, Kes?
Oh, I was just going to say, it really impacts on their ability to empathize as well.
It really does.
Yep.
Yeah. And as you know, we've spoken about that theory of mind many, many times. And so often they're using their behavior to communicate what's happening for them, and they don't feel heard until they actually see that same level of behavior in us. And so they'll poke you and poke you and poke you and poke you until you're losing it, for you to actually then mirror back the same things. As adults, we are actually taught, don't respond, don't react, stay calm, stay level, and it can be very, very confusing. Yes, Kes?
Yeah, Steve's just asking, in what ways does it affect empathy?
That's a really good question. The answer would be it affects empathy in that because they're not aware of what's happening in their body or how they feel in their body, they can't actually imagine how their behavior would feel to someone else. So therefore they can't empathize because they can't imagine what that would feel like. So because they often don't have the same sensation of pain as we do, or they may find deep pressure very comforting and soothing, to be knocking into people, which some people would find distressing, they actually find that that brings them pleasure and comfort. So they would actually then be confused why somebody might find that not pleasant. When we're thinking about sexualized behavior, if they find a release of anxiety and stress and distress in self-stimulation, they would be confused by somebody be telling them to stop doing something that they find meets a need. So they wouldn't actually have empathy for somebody's experience of their sexualized behavior, because it just brings them, probably might be the only thing that brings them pleasure and joy in their lives. So they would be very confused why people would be saying to them, no, don't do that. That's naughty. Don't do it. It's not safe. It's not okay. But something that brings them relief and pleasure, to be told not to do that and not okay, would be very confusing. Is that helpful?
Yes. Got something from David Watson here, and I'm just going to bring it up so I can read the whole thing.
Yeah, David often has really insightful things to say.
Yeah, I just don't know if I've got the whole lot here. Here we go. Hang on. Just want to make sure I can read the whole lot. Oh, gosh.
That's all right. You find it and we'll come back to you.
So I've got it. Some of the smaller behaviours can be branded as sexual behaviour, and the label goes with the child.
Absolutely.
Sometimes do you find the need to keep things quiet means people aren't aware of the issues? How do you let people know there's an issue without branding, especially when you aren't sure whether it's an understanding, communication, and personal space? Sorry. When you aren't sure whether it's not understanding, communication, and personal space, it's sexualized and hasn't gone on there.
Yeah. Yeah, but I hear what David's asking, and I don't have a great answer. I don't really know. I think one of the things with all of this stuff, there is not one size fits all. And it would be about educating the staff team around it and reducing their anxiety so that when they are actually communicating with parents, they're not communicating it from an anxious space themselves. And that they're very clear when they are communicating with parents around the developmental ages, the sexual developmental ages, and the normal sexual developmental ages of children. And I've got this fantastic Australian website. Where is it? Here. It's called Sex Edge Rescue. And it's in the PowerPoint, and it goes through very, very clearly child's normal sexual development. And if you can be clear about that when you go into some of those more difficult meetings, and you can talk from that space about a developmental appropriate level of process and progress, that can actually be really helpful. And working very quickly when you identify that there are some problem sexualized behaviors, that you do get an OT involved very, very quickly. Because when it's just emergent behavior, an intervention from them would address it if it was a sensory or cause and effect behavior. And if it's not addressed by an OT intervention, then you have a pretty good clue that it's as a result of them experiencing problem sexualized behavior towards themselves, and them having an experience of that in some way, shape or form, and that requires a different intervention again.
Great advice, Bobbi. Just going back to theory of mind.
Yes.
Aisha's just saying that explains why her child pokes the bear until he gets a dramatic response. And Kelly made the response after that. Totally, she has an issue with her son's support workers that he, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so they actually almost rev people up to the same level of anxiety or anger or excitement or distress for their own sense to be mirrored, to go, oh, yes, you get it now. And often they'll poke the bear so badly that everybody's losing it, and they kind of go, oh, that's it, good. And off they toddle off, and they're merrily on their way, and they're chatting to you, and they're all relieved and happy, and you're like rocking in the corner going, oh, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to look at you, you've just driven me crazy. And then they become very confused about our response to them to being happy and relieved. It's a very, very confusing space for them. Supervision is absolutely paramount. When we have got children, they just cannot be left on their own together, unsupervised. And if things go quiet, run. You know, I know from experience that two boys being in a room playing together, if there's even if they're developmentally the same age, if there's a chronological difference, it just cannot be done. Yes, Karen.
Yeah, David's asked, do you have any pearls of wisdom about how to reduce anxiety in teachers who are scared of the thought of a child with sexualized behaviour in their classroom?
Yeah, so it's that educating them about the sexually appropriate development, and then reassuring them and giving them a really practical toolkit of things that they can do. So things like routines and following predictable patterns of behavior and rhythms, ensuring that you've had the OT come in, so there's lots of sensory breaks, having lots of movement breaks, keeping them busy, having lots of things that meet their needs for cause and effect other than sexualized behavior, having them have good breaks in classrooms with older students, so that that's actually scheduled so that the teacher has breaks regularly in the day from having to be hypervigilant, having them access EAP, having regular professional development and one-on-one support.
That's good, Bobbi.
So that's really all you can do, and just regularly checking in with them and reassuring them that they're doing a good job and it's not a reflection on their capacity or ability as a teacher.
That's good.
Making sure there's family support and counselling in place. Having a masturbation schedule and guidelines about where you can masturbate, when you can masturbate, how you clean up after you masturbate. One of the big issues is that some of the medication that some of our young people are put on to manage anxiety, depression, and aggressive behaviour means that they can't actually masturbate to orgasm. And they become very frustrated by this because they don't end up with a physiological release. And that can actually lead to masturbating to the point of actually hurting themselves. So you do need to have a good pediatrician or an endocrinologist on board to help with that and to understand if it's a medical or physiological thing that's really driving that behaviour. Having very clear, consistent and concise directions and language for everybody around what to do and what's going on is really important. Anything else, Kez? No? Okay. Regular physical exercise is critically important. I actually can't stress it enough. I work with families to try and get an exercise physiologist on board to help design a regular exercise program, and then getting a personal trainer on board a couple of times a week to support with that. That can be covered by the NDIS. The NDIS will cover all of these interventions that we're talking about. Yes, Kez?
Callie's just got a question. How do you explain to your child inappropriate, over-sexualized language outbursts? Honestly, we have not had that talk with our son yet because I think he won't understand. But then he shouts things out that just make my jaw drop, wondering where and how he would know that.
Yes, yeah. And look, they watch YouTube. There's other kids at school. I happen to know that a little fella got onto the bus the other day here in Ballarat and said to all the girls on the bus, "Show me your boobies." And there was all a big cry and ha about that. He had no idea that what he was doing was inappropriate. He's trying to engage. He's trying to get attention and engagement. He's trying to have people interact with him and not ignore him and leave him alone. He's overwhelmed by the hormones going through his body, so he does find boobies pretty interesting. And thinking about some of our children, their body mass is quite high. So therefore, and that's often as a result of medication that they're on that does alter their metabolic state anyway. And so they actually do get more flushes of testosterone. The other thing is that saying these things can actually get really quick attention. More quick attention than anything else that they'll say. So if they're not quite sure what to do, or they're feeling a bit bored and they call out something that's sexually explicit, you're going to be there. You'll drop what you're doing. And look, I think that we've really seen an increase in this behaviour during lockdown because parents have been working from home. So there's been this crazy tension of, oh, I've got you at home, I've got to work, and I've got to try and split my time between a high school student, a primary school student, a special school student. Work's emails are coming in. I have to still work. I've actually got to cook dinner and do the shopping and managing everything else. That sometimes those crazy statements are the things that get us to actually stop working. And even if we get engaged in an angry and frustrated way, we're still engaging. Unfortunately, it works quite well for them. Let's see. Reduce boredom wherever you can. What is it? Idle hands get to mischief. And so that can be a very real thing. Talking about sexualized behavior as tricky or unexpected behavior rather than inappropriate behavior. So talking about people do not expect to see your penis at the kitchen table. Your penis comes out in the toilet, the bathroom, and your bedroom. Some people find the behavior that you're doing right now very tricky and they're not sure how to manage it when you put your hands down your pants or you rock. It's not expected that when I walk out of my bedroom in the morning, the first thing that you do is grab my breast. That's an unexpected behavior, and I find that I don't like it and I don't want you to do it anymore. And then working with your partner or other people in your home to give those same messages in a very clear, concise, and consistent way. But it's hard yards. If you need to, the community policing team are amazing, and the sexual assault teams are quite good. They're very good at responding in the moment, but often they're not so great in the follow-up because they're so busy responding all of the time to the next crisis that comes along. So they're not really set up to follow up where the community policing and your youth police officers in the community are the ones that can follow that up, and your therapist can contact them and ask them to follow through. We had a situation today where a community police officer went to a family home and spent over an hour with the family just talking about safe and unsafe behaviour and okay and not okay touch, and that, you know, nobody's allowed to touch our body and we're not allowed to touch anybody else's body. And look, it's been gone over and over and over again. But just hearing it from a police officer sometimes can be really helpful. And this police officer said to the family, look, I am a local person. You just need to contact me and I'm happy to pop over, and I'm just going to pop in and check in on you on a regular basis. Yes, Karen?
Just a contact for that person, if that's possible, Bobbi, a contact number?
Yeah, sure. So that's actually Des Hudson. And if you just go to the Ballarat City Council website and find Des on there. His mobile number's there. It's really easy to get a hold of, and he's absolutely delighted to help. So I'm happy to name and praise. It's not name and shame, it's name and praise. He did a stellar job today with that.
Okay.
I'm really proud of him.
Up on the chat, and Aisha's also got the link there as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well done, everyone. Now, having some good books and resources is really, really important, because they're the things that you can lay your hand to. And often having everybody with the same language can be quite difficult when you have a village raising a child. And often our kids with disabilities, they will have a speech therapist, an OT, a psychologist, a behaviour therapist. They'll have half a dozen learning support officers at school, and they'll change teachers every year, and they'll go to a holiday program, and the list of people goes on. So making sure that everybody has the same language can be really, really challenging. So I have trawled, and I have purchased, and I have looked at and researched some resources, and I've got a range to share with you tonight. So these books are from Secret Girls Business, and they've got a range of books. So I particularly love their Special Girls Business. It's very explicit but very simply written. They have got Puberty and Special Girls. And I would have to say this would be the one that we use the most, actually, is Special Boys Business. So it's exactly the same, but really good explicit stuff, well written. And I actually was made contact with the publishers today, and they are turning off postage on their website for the next 48 hours. So nobody else knows that except for people on our webinar tonight, and they're just free postage for all of us if we want to order anything. Now, a lot of us have NDIS plans. If you are self-managed, you can just go ahead and buy them and reimburse yourself. If you're plan managed and you can afford to buy them, you can then buy them and send the receipt to your plan manager to be reimbursed. If you are NDIA managed and you don't have a therapist who's able to buy these for you, we are NDIA registered for consumables, and you can call the office and we can do a service agreement with you for the purchase of these books. And if you're really, really broke and you truly, truly need them and you can't afford them, let me know and we'll make sure you get a copy.
Bobbi, is the website secretgb.com?
Yeah, Secret Girls Business, that's right. Thanks, Aisha. They have an amazing resource for schools as well. David, this one will be great for you. So it goes all the way through 14 different education components, and just hold on a sec, sorry. It comes in a great big poster set like this, and I use these with a lot of my kids. They don't come laminated. We got them laminated, and these have been invaluable. Sorry, they are pretty explicit, but they go through exactly what goes on. These have been amazing with some of my sight impaired kids as well. And it comes with a booklet with how to actually use the posters. So they're really helpful for schools. Absolutely worth getting. Yes, Kim?
There is a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So one from Isabella, do you have books on younger children or for younger children?
Yeah.
And Verity's got, they are great, and I have the whole range. Interestingly, my special person is quite into these books. I probably don't read them to her enough. My pediatrician told me about them too. And the question is, how often should you read them?
Once a month at least. So if you go on the first day of the month or the last day of the month, I'm just going to do it as a matter of course. And it may be that you say to all of your support workers that they need to read them once a month as well. And you can put it in their schedule. These bigger books are actually ideal for little people as well. And then what they have, so these are kind of for your non-verbal up to about 10-year-olds developmentally. And then they have an older book. So more Secret Girls Business. It goes into relationships, the secret business of relationships and sex. So this covers everything like contraception, consent, dealing with a relationship breakup and what you can do and all the different feelings that you're going to have. And look, it's still very nicely written. I hope I haven't picked a too bad one. Parenting, all about parenting. There's the Secret Boys Business that's a bit more advanced, and the Secret Girls Business that's a bit more advanced. So they are an excellent resource. I was looking around for some books on masturbation, and I came across, let me go to this next slide, Things Tom Likes. And this is a very explicit book about masturbation, when to do it, when not to do it. So it's not okay to do it when you're watching TV with the family, but it is okay to do it in your bedroom. It talks about Tom closes his bedroom door, then he gets comfortable, and then he touches his penis. And then he gets dressed and he washes his hands, and a whole process very practically, like a social story, to go through actually how to masturbate properly and neatly and cleanly and in a respectable way. To pretend that it is not going to happen and that you don't need to do deliberate and explicit training about it is just burying your head in the sand. So they've also got a book called Things Ellie Likes. And the other book that's got that I think is quite amazing, and it's Tom Needs to Go and Ellie Needs to Go. So it's a guideline for using public toilets. And we don't think that we need to train around that, but I do want to show you a picture from this, and I was like, I don't know if you can see this, but I can just imagine our young people doing this, but just looking at another person's penis while they're actually using the urinal. It's like, don't do that. Don't lean over and have a good gawk. It's actually not okay, but we don't explicitly teach that. And then there's one that I don't have that I only found today, was Things Tom and Ellie Like to Do Together. So a bit of a handbook on what's okay, what's not okay, what's going too far, what's getting too hot, and I find that to be really good. Sexual Health and Family Planning in the ACT have a great program called So Safe. I'm not sure if Family Planning down here's got it. That's a really good program as well. Just mindful of the time. And this is a great one that we're using at the moment with one of our young friends. A 5 is Against the Law. So it's a very straight up workbook. It's actually really old, but it's actually really, really good. So it's when does a kiss or a glance become a crime? And for some of our young people, we actually have to be that explicit about it's actually illegal for you to do that. And it's got 5-point scales, and which they're often familiar with 5-point scales from the amazing 5-point scale that they use at school a lot. And it talks about, working out what behaviours are okay and what's not okay, ranking these behaviours, scoring them, so they exactly know what's okay and what's not okay. So I would say they're my most favoured resources at the moment. And if anybody else knows of any other resources, I'm very curious to know about that, because we can't possibly hope to know of all the resources out there. Now, Karen, I'm mindful of the time. Have we got any more questions?
Callie's just put something in chat saying, sorry for the explicit content, but how do I respond to mum? Do you F dad? Then explain such outbursts are inappropriate, especially when we're out at the supermarket. Then you get a response like, well, you must, because how do you think I got here?
I can just hear that happening. I think one of the things that prevents that from happening is actually having the talks earlier, because they don't know a setting when it's okay to talk about that. And often they don't actually have you on their own, and they might see something that triggers that thought in the supermarket, and so then they choose to ask it in that moment. And often they're quite loud about how they do it. And I'm not sure why they do that, but they do. So Kelly, I would really actually recommend to you the Secret Boys Business book to go through with your young fellow. I've got it here, and you can have a look at it next time that you're here. And to actually set a time for him so he knows that he's got a regular time when he can talk about these things. And it might be that you say to him, you make an appointment with him about when you're going to look at the book again. I think he would be really comforted by that. So if he knew on Wednesdays when we got back home from Bobbi's office and your appointment with Bobbi, we're actually going to get out the book and we're going to read the book together, and then you'll have an opportunity to talk about it and ask any questions that you've got. Then if he brings up the behavior in an inappropriate place, you can just say, excuse me, remember, we have our special time for talking about this stuff privately at home. And if you can just hold that thought, then we can talk about it on Wednesday afternoon. But if you're worried you're going to forget, you can whisper it in my ear now, and I'll just put a little reminder in my phone. Because often what happens is the reason our kids are so blurty with their questions is that they're worried they're going to forget it. So it flashes into their head and they go, oh yes, that's a great question. I need to ask that right now. And they've experienced many, many, many times the grief of losing a thought and not being able to get it back, and then remembering it again at another time when they can't ask the question. And so that's their processing speed and their short-term memory issues.
A few people just want to thank you, Bobbi, and I want to thank you too for your honesty and sharing about your son. That would have been very difficult.
Thanks, Kez.
Thanks for your transparency about that. Bless your heart.
Oh, thank you. I think if as professionals we're not actually able to be honest and vulnerable with the real challenges that happen in our lives, there can't be trust to work together.
Yeah, that's right. There's just a question. Oh, sorry, and it's just gone up here. How can school staff assist a child that flashes his penis and bottom, is a 10-year-old, although developmentally aged lower, with a trauma background?
Yeah. So that's about filling his time so much that he doesn't need to do that, and meeting every need that he can possibly have within the setting. We've got a young lad that we're working with who has got a huge trauma background, and we have wrestled with the education department and said this boy only does these behaviours when his needs aren't being met and he's not feeling safe. So we now actually have him attending school 3 hours a day, and he actually has a teacher and an aide that support him for those 3 hours a day. And since he's had that level of support, we've seen an extinguishing of those kinds of inappropriate behaviours. So what we've done is we've wrapped around him very tightly emotionally and given him a program of preferred activities with low demand. And we're not actually going to increase his time at school probably for the next 2 years, because we feel like that's how long it's likely going to take for him to feel secure. But what we are going to do is very incrementally increase the demand on him in that time, and as he's tolerating that, slowly ease off some of the intensity of the 2-on-1 support.
Yeah, that's great, Bobbi. Someone had a question about emailing the answers into the questions to get the certificate. That's correct.
Yes.
That's what
Sorry, I should put that slide up so people can be copying it down.
That's
Mind
right.
you, these slides will be available on the website tomorrow. Aisha does an amazing job. She has the recording available on the website, if not tonight, tomorrow morning. And the slides will be available as well. Please remember that we do have all of our webinars that we do available for free on the website for anybody who would benefit from them.
Yeah. Someone else has just made the comment that her daughter's very private, anything to do with puberty and physical development and learning about sex. And she only talks about that with her mum. And she's just asking, is there any tips on building the amount of people she can feel safe talking about this with?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the ways to help her to feel safe is actually to have a book that is out in a public space in the house. Not all of the time, but just every now and then, that it's visible and just normalized in the space, and incrementally bring it out of her bedroom and out of her private space into a slightly more safe family related space.
Yeah, that's great, Bobbi. Thank you. Steve's just asking any advice. We have a little boy who pulls out his willy and plays with it, wanting it to show it to others. And now there are 3 little boys involved in the same behaviour together.
So I would call it that's developmentally appropriate behaviour, but they require explicit supervision and redirection until they kind of forget about doing that behaviour. So they don't actually know what else to do. So often what will happen is adults will come up and go, you boys aren't allowed to do that, off you go and play. But they're kind of a bit embarrassed and a bit shocked and a bit shy and a bit shamed, and they actually don't know what to do next. So if we do interrupt any behaviour that is not appropriate in its timing and where it happens, it's redirecting explicitly to what they're to go and do. So it may be, I want you to go over and see Mrs. Smith, and I want you to get 3 balls, and I want you boys over here near me because I'm supervising over here, and I want to see how many times you can bounce the ball. So that you're actually giving them something constructive to do that gives them some physical feedback but replaces the behaviour. And then when they're going into those situations where they're likely to do that behaviour, actually clearly giving them instructions for what to do with that time.
Yeah, that's really good, Bobbi. He's just saying there's no embarrassment. It's the willy dance. But thanks for the ideas. Verity's just got a comment here, and I think it's really good. Bobbi, you speak from the heart with passion and deep understanding of these young people. Thank you so much for your professionalism and practical help and support. You are really great and bring comfort to others.
Oh, thanks, Verity. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's all I really hope that comes from our times together, because there's no quick or easy answers for any of this. We just go on a journey together and learn.
I think though, Bobbi, that hats off to you. Hats off to you. That was a gutsy effort, and your vulnerability is really appreciated.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Aisha, did you want to say something?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Yes, I want to second that as well. I also wanted to mention that we're not having a webinar in July because it's in the school holidays and we all probably need a break. So the next one that we've got scheduled is another really tricky one, which I've had a lot of personal experience with, which is, and Bobbi, you've helped me a lot, which is dealing with violent behaviour. So if you've got that as well, please join us. We don't have a sign up yet, but we will be emailing you closer to the time. But it's the first Thursday in August, which is miles away.
It's actually not. And then our next one after that, we're actually changing it up because we now have a pediatric dietitian who specialises in disordered eating and oral sensory motor issues. So Kiri, who now works with Bobbi Cook Behaviour Management, will be doing a session with me. We'll be presenting together on disordered eating and like, you know, how kids will only eat certain foods and they won't try new things, and how we get worried about their nutrition and their relationships with food. So having...
I'm sure lots of us have children that would only eat white food. I've got to say, it does get better. My 15-year-old even likes samosas and curry now. So not just the rice.
So Kiri is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to you getting to know her. She has got a wealth of experience, and she loves food, which I think is really, really important for a dietitian to love food. We kind of have this perception that dietitians don't like food and they don't want us to love food. And one of the first things she said when she started work and we were having a meeting, she's like, "Oh, can I bring a cake? I love to cook." So I think she is going to help us change our perception around food and give us some amazing strategies and support. And if anybody would like a consult with Kiri, just ring the office and we can get that sorted out for you. She's available on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Isabella's just asking if anyone can join these chats, and yes, you can, Isabella. It's the same sort of idea as the webinar, but just a different way of doing it.
That's right.
Aisha, I don't know if we've done this yet. Someone's asking for the link for the publisher for the book.
Yes. They're all on the website, so I'll just go copy them off myself from my own.
Fantastic. Yes. So it's Secret Girls Business.
It's already on the website. I just haven't obviously done the video, so it might be easier if I just give you the link to that page.
Great. I'll get you to put that in.
Because I do everything while I listen and take notes, and
you do a great
job. We really appreciate it.
So you'll get all the links on there. An email will come out tomorrow with the questions if you need the certificate as well.
So if you need a certificate for your professional learning, you need to answer the questions. If you just want a certificate of attendance, you don't need to answer the questions. You can just email Paula tomorrow and ask for an attendance certificate. It's just for lots of our professional organisations. They now require us to answer questions to prove that we've actually attended and have been present for the whole presentation. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great to have you here. Congratulations to Jen for managing to be here for the first time tonight and navigating the technology. It's been amazing to have you. And everyone else, thank you so much for your kindness and your patience and joining us in this challenging topic. Enjoy kids going back to school if you're regional in Victoria tomorrow, and if you're still in lockdown in Melbourne, our hearts go out to you, and please be very gentle on yourself. And really, if you don't get every learning task done, it really doesn't matter, and your relationship with your child is more important. Good night, everyone. We'll let you go.
Yeah, Kelly's asking